Greetings. As an introduction, allow me to borrow the explanation of the original trolley problem, and its findings from someone who can better conclude it. After the intro, I will continue with the extensions, all rights reserved to the real authors. If there are any copyright problems, I can just re-explain it myself, but I really like Kevin Dutton's explanation.
We all know about the psychopath's enhanced killer instinct, their finely tuned vulnerability antennae, but it may surprise you to know that there are some situations in which psychopaths are actually more adept at saving lives than they are at taking them. So let me give you an example of what I mean by that, okay? Imagine you've got a train and it's hurtling down a track. In its path, 5 people are trapped on the line and cannot escape. Fortunately, you can flick a switch which diverts the train down a fork in that track away from those 5 people, but at a price. There is another person trapped down that fork and the train will kill them instead. Question: should you flick the switch? Now, most people have little trouble deciding what to do under those circumstances. Though the thought of flicking the switch isn't exactly a nice one, the utilitarian choice, as it were, killing just the one person instead of the 5, represents the least worst option, okay? But now let me give you a variation. You've got a train speeding out of control down a track, and it's going to plough into 5 people on the line. But this time you are standing behind a very large stranger on a footbridge above that track. The only way to save the people is to heave the stranger over. He will fall to a certain death, but his considerable bulk will block the train, saving 5 lives. Now we've got what we might call a real dilemma on our hands, okay? While the score in lives is precisely the same as in the first scenario, 5-1, one's choice of action appears far trickier. Now, why should that be? Well, the reason, it turns out, all boils down to temperature, okay? Case 1 represents what we might call an impersonal dilemma. It involves those areas of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the posterior parietal cortex, in particular the anterior paracingulate cortex, the temporal pole, and the superior temporal sulcus, bit of neuroanatomy for you there, primarily responsible for what we call cold empathy, for reasoning and rational thought. Case 2, on the other hand, represents what we might call a personal dilemma. It involves the emotion center of the brain, known as the amygdala, the circuitry of hot empathy, what we might call the feeling of feeling what another person is feeling. Now, psychopaths, just like most normal members of the population, have no trouble at all with case 1. They flick the switch and the train diverts accordingly, killing just the 1 person instead of the 5. But this is where the plot thickens. Quite unlike normal members of the population, psychopaths also experience little difficulty with case 2. Psychopaths, without a moment's hesitation, are perfectly willing to chuck the fat guy over the rails if that's what the doctor orders. Now, moreover, this difference in behavior has a distinct neural signature. The pattern of brain activation in both normal people and psychopaths is identical on the presentation of the impersonal moral dilemma, but radically different when things start to get a bit more personal. Imagine that I were to hook you up to a brain scanner, a functional magnetic resonance imaging machine, and were to present you with those 2 dilemmas, okay? What would I observe as you went about trying to solve them? Well, at the precise moment that the nature of the dilemma switches from impersonal to personal, I would see the emotion center of your brain, your amygdala, and related brain circuits, the medial orbitofrontal cortex, for example, light up like a pinball machine. I would witness the moment, in other words, when emotion puts its money in the slot. But in psychopaths, I would see precisely nothing. And the passage from impersonal to personal would slip by unnoticed, because that emotion neighborhood of their brains, that emotional zip code, has a neural curfew. And that's why they're perfectly happy to chuck that fat guy over the side without even batting an eye.
Thank you, Mr. Dutton. Now we have one major problem. Modern psychology doesn't make a difference between a neurotypical and an empath. This experiment is incomplete. We know the psychopath's reaction and brain scan. We know the neurotypical's reaction and brain scan. What is missing is a true empath. Let me explain. A true empath is somebody who only has warm empathy. No cold one. A neurotypical can't empathize with things that are okay to empathize with. They are the flock, following the hive mind. But a true empath's ability to empathize is not limited. They can also empathize with a serial killer pedophile whose favorite hobby is to torture puppies. They are the people who will first listen to both sides of an argument before judging. If you put a true empath to the trolley problem, and note the reactions might differ from one individual to another, but, generally speaking, they will not flick the switch and they will not push the fat guy. Because they also see that the 2 problems are actually the same. Sacrificing an innocent. And if the worth of a life is infinite, And if really all life matters, 5 times infinite is just as infinite as 1 times infinite. Neurotypes don't know the true value of a soul. Empaths will not play God, if the people are strangers. Maybe the one you sacrificed is Albert Einstein and the 5 you saved are just some human traffickers. You cannot know. Psychopaths and empaths both know, there is no difference between flicking the switch and pushing the fat guy. Both mean playing God. Both mean murder. But neurotypicals are unable to see this. My personal opinion is, psycho and empath have more things in common than any of the groups with neurotypicals. Psychopaths can use cold reasoning, undisturbed by the hive mind's bias, and empaths know what the situation feels like to each participant, and what the emotional consequences will be for everyone involved. It would be interesting to see a real empath's reaction brain scan. It would also be an interesting experiment to make the empaths see a video of a hunter and the prey, and ask them to watch it 3 times. First time empathize into the hunter. Second time empathize with the victim. And for the last time, suppress their emotions completely, and just watch without bias. For the second part of this extension, I want to mention an argument. Well, a chain of arguments I had about abortion. Now, let's start with an analogy, because examples can move forward understanding. Note that this is just my attempt to help a neurotypical understand what the empath can see by default. Also, please keep the trolley problem in mind. Imagine your city is bombed. You are trying to defend, so you throw a bomb at the enemy. But the bomb finds one of your comrades instead. He almost dies. The only way you can save him is by attaching your bloodstream to him with a medical tube. But after some time, you realize you can't or don't want to live like this anymore. It hurts you, it makes your whole life uncomfortable. At any point it can potentially kill you even though everything is fine now. Or it can cause complications. You could even call detaching the guy a self-defense response. Can you detach, knowing it will kill the other guy? Can you detach knowing it was your fault that the guy needed the tube? What if the only way you can detach is by ripping his guts out with a tube? Can you detach? What if after 9 months he can get a new heart somehow and survive? Can you detach prematurely if you wish to? If you said at any point of the above that you cannot detach, congratulations, you just pushed the fat guy into his demise. Sacrificing a life for another. You played God, deciding who is more important. Who is more important to you? You changed the fated scenario. Because you made the decision. Not nature, not the people involved. But you. Now my analogy was obviously as follows. The baby is the bombed comrade. The mother is you, who wishes to detach. And I hope I left some people with something to pensive about. If some of you decide to make the suggested brain scans, please mention me in the publication. My citation name is LadyTime11, yes, the number is part of the name. Thanks for watching, I'll be back to shock you again soon.